Okay, Michael, so we are doing Goodfellas today. That is the movie we're reviewing. So I thought the movie has inspired so much over the years that it should inspire us to try out our Italian-American accents.
That makes sense.
Which are always funny to do. Yeah, so go on, you go first.
Hey, Copernicus, why don't you navigate yourself to the back of the line with your legs and stand there with your shirt?
That sounds like a Simpsons reference.
It's actually from Family Guy. There's also a really good joke in Family Guy where Chris has to go to a school, I think it's like a Catholic school, where there's loads of Italian Americans there, and the guy's like, everyone say hello to Chris, and everyone's like, hey, and then he's like, hey Chris, you see it's your first day and you got all A's. So, classic.
That's great.
Yeah, anyway, now you do yours.
Okay. Hey, I'm walking here. How about that?
That's good.
Hey, how you doing? You fucking Goomba? Hey, Gabagool.
Oh, that
Hey,
Goomba.
bada bing.
Wait a minute, is that why? Aren't the bad guys in Super Mario called Goombas? And isn't Mario Italian? So,
yeah.
I guess that's why. That would be so funny. Like, imagine if Mario from, Super Mario was an Italian American. And he was just like
sure
it suddenly becomes like a
mobster
thing. It's just like, hey, what are you doing there, turtle? Get out of here.
Hey, from the boot to the burr.
Hey, hey, Princess Peach, why don't you go get yourself something nice?
Great. Aren't they so funny? Aren't they so hilarious? And that's the point of Goodfellas. Right, let's go.
Hey, and welcome to Select and Reflect, the movie review podcast where we look at films that come out in the near and distant past, we give them a couple of watches and evaluate them beyond first impressions. I'm your host, Michael, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Luke. And this week, we are celebrating the 30-year anniversary of Goodfellas. So Luke, why don't you tell us a thing or two about Goodfellas?
Sure thing, Michael. So yes, you're right. We are doing a review of Goodfellas. The 30th anniversary has just been and gone. It is a 1990 American crime film, directed, as you said, by Martin Scorsese, produced by Irwin Winkler, and it is an adaptation of the 1985 non-fiction book Wise Guy by Nicholas Pileggi. Initially, that's what the movie was going to be called, but apparently there were a couple of other movies or TV shows that were released around this time also called Wise Guys. So he went with Goodfellas instead, which I think is a better name anyway. And Nicholas Pileggi co-wrote the screenplay with Scorsese. It stars Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, Lorraine Bracco, and Paul Sorvino. Those are the five main actors. It was released on September the 19th, 1990, in the United States. I'm going to ask you another question actually first, Michael. Do you know where the premiere was?
Well, obviously it's got to be an interesting answer. I'm going to go for what feels like, to me, an interesting answer that would make sense. So I'm going to go for Palermo in Sicily.
Venice.
Okay, so I was kind of in like the same, the right idea.
Yes, yeah, in Italy, which obviously isn't the usual place a film is released first. Can you guess the budget, though, Michael, for Goodfellas?
I don't know. Usually I'm wrong. I'm going to go for 12 million.
I would say not a bad guess, but it is 25.
Okay.
You got quite a lot of actors in this one, don't you? It's quite long. Yeah. What is the box office for Goodfellas, Michael? Can you guess that?
Oh, this one's going to be even harder because I really have no idea how much a film like this should be expected to make. But I'm going to guess, I feel like 100 million seems appropriate for a film like this. I mean, it's famous, but I feel like that's kind of just because it's good rather than because it was a box office hit.
You would be correct in that. The box office gross from Goodfellas was only 46.8 million. So half your guess. Yeah, not even double the budget. And it goes back to what I said with The Usual Suspects a few weeks ago, a movie which received so much critical acclaim, can really make it last long in the culture, make it into a classic movie. If it was released in the 1990s, or earlier than that, I guess, as well. Because, if you had a movie like this that only grossed 47 million nowadays, nobody's remembering it. But, of course, we are reviewing it not because of the box office returns it made at the time, but because it is one of the preeminent gangster movies ever made. It is a classic of the genre, or just a classic in general, I guess. Here on Wikipedia it says Goodfellas is widely regarded as one of the greatest films ever made, particularly in the gangster genre, and in 2000, just 10 years after its release, it was deemed culturally, historically and aesthetically significant and selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the United States Library of Congress. And its content and style have been emulated in numerous other films and television series. Martin Scorsese, a very famous director, this, is probably the high point of his career, which is, this is incredible, really, this movie, the amount of acclaim it's got. Was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, with Joe Pesci winning Best Supporting Actor. So all of this, Michael, is meaningless, right? Because the only thing that matters is what we thought of it. So can you tell me, did you like Goodfellas?
Yeah, I liked it. I would broadly say it deserves generally the kudos it gets. I mean, I wouldn't say like the best film ever made, but kind of whenever I feel, hear that, I just think it just means, like, people say the best film ever made about, like The Dark Knight and things like that. So insofar as we live in a very hyperbolic society, I think saying this is one of the best films ever made is a reasonable thing to say. I would just say I really liked it. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's a good movie, very good movie, but I do feel like the people who think it's... You see, I don't know.
Do you think the people who say they really like it, or the people who do really like it for kind of the wrong reasons?
Yes, there is that, but there is also an acknowledgement of how good it is. And I'm not sure what the split is. Is it like people say, oh, this is an amazing movie, one of the best ever? Is it like 70-30 percent-wise, people think it's, 70% of people like it for the quote-unquote wrong reasons and don't really get it?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But it is still a very good movie. And of course, we'll dive into people's perceptions of Goodfellas and all of that later on. But firstly, Michael, nitpicks. How many do you have?
Yeah, I've got 3. And I also, I just on the fly realised I do have one lit pick. So three nitpicks, 1 lit pick.
I can tell there's probably going to be some cooking nitpicks, because there was, of course, quite a bit of cooking in this movie. And I'm not saying C-U-C-K,
I get you. It's okay.
I've only got 1, so I'll go first. So in 1955, Henry Hill is 13 years old. In 1963, therefore, he's 21 years old, and the film even says he's 21 years old when he marries his wife, or meets his wife for the first time, I guess. We can assume the same for Joe Pesci, but maybe he's a bit older. Maybe he's 17, and then he's like 23 in 1963, or something like that. There's one problem, though. Ray Liotta doesn't look like he's in his early 20s in 1963. He looks like he's in his late 20s. And Joe Pesci looks
like he's 50.
He looks, I was going to say 35. But yeah, also Joe Pesci is an issue as well. So yeah, and obviously Scorsese perfected this aging thing with The Irishman. Absolutely no issues with that.
Yeah.
That's a joke, by the way.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, the massive nose.
But yeah, before that, he just went with, fuck it. This guy who looks exactly the same when he's 21 as he does later on in the movie when he's meant to be 40 or near 40, when he actually looks kind of near 40. Yeah, it's all good. It's all fine. We'll just go with it. And I just think that is a nitpick, which you can't really get around, unfortunately. So that's it. What are your nitpicks?
Well, I decided one of mine was a bit just not up to snuff, up to my usual high standards. So I'm going to limit it to 2. But like I say, I've got my lit pick now. So 1, the school decided after he'd not been in school for months that this was the time to send a letter. I just find that funny. The idea of like the school being like, okay, it's been 3 months now. When it was 2 months, that was fine. But it's 3 months. Time to send a letter.
I don't. Maybe the education system in America wasn't that good back then, Michael. Yeah, what's your other nitpicks?
Okay, another one. I found this out almost coincidentally, but quite recently. But suppressors actually get rid of muzzle flashes. I found that out because I was watching a video. It was actually because I was watching the old that film I really like, No Country for Old Men. And obviously there's a scene in it where a guy is shooting people with a suppressed shotgun. And I thought, I'm sure suppressed shotguns aren't that quiet. So I wanted to look up what actual suppressed weapons sound like. And it turns out they sound, like I suspected, a lot louder than they're often presented in films. But the other thing the guy said, completely just offhandedly, was they also, suppressors get rid of the muzzle flash of weapons. And of course, when Joe Pesci shoots someone with a suppressed weapon, you can see the muzzle flash. So there we go. Now, as for my lit pick, I thought about it while you were talking, and it was, of course, that Joe Pesci won Best Supporting Actor, and he gave a really classic acceptance speech. I don't know if you know about this, but of course his acceptance speech when he won Best Supporting Actor is he just stands up and says something like, "It was a pleasure, thank you," and then he walks off stage.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed that speech, so well done him. Anyway, so those are my nitpicks and lit picks. How about the plot, Luke?
Well, sorry, Michael. I criticised you for. I thought there would be some cooking.
Oh yeah. Sorry, you did mention it. Yeah, to be honest, I couldn't really think of any. I mean, I will say this though. Actually, I had a pretty Italian. It's not really a nitpick or anything. I had a pretty Italian meal this evening. Of course, I was in charge of the cooking. I was in charge of the sauce. It wasn't actually a sauce thing, but it was a chicken stuffed with pastrami and mushroom. I think that's pretty Italian, right?
That
chicken cutlet stuffed with pastrami.
Yeah, it sounds pretty Italian to me. Anyway,
speaking of Italian, plot.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. So the plot. The film stars Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, and it narrates the rise of their characters, and particularly the fall of mob associate Henry Hill, who is of course played by Ray Liotta, and his friends and family from 1955 to 1980. So yeah, a 25-year period, which again I say he goes from looking 28 to about 34 maximum. In that 25, in the 17-year period when he starts.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to place like time passing.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's difficult, but yeah, I just can't get over it, as you can tell. Anyway, so the plot. Well, we'll talk about the structure first because here's the thing: it's an unusually structured movie. It takes place over the course of 25 years, and you have episodes, I guess. You have in 1955. That's the start. Then in 1963, then 1970, and then a bunch in the 70s, and then in 1980 as well, and that's when the movie ends. When he calls himself a schnook, and I looked at this on the Wikipedia page, and Scorsese and Pileggi, they chose the sections of the book that they liked and put them together like building blocks. So of course this is based off a book. Scorsese persuaded Pileggi that they did not need to follow a traditional narrative structure. The director wanted to take the gangster film and deal with it episode by episode. Scorsese compacted scenes, realizing that if they were kept short, the impact after about an hour and a half would be terrific. So that's what they did. That's why the movie is structured like it is. So yeah, it's not traditional, Michael. What do you think of that? Do you like it?
Yeah, I think in this case, I mean, the thing is, a lot of mob films are very episodic. I can't think really of a single gangster film that has one overarching plot, especially not, maybe there's, things like Chinese gangster films and things like that. But when I'm talking about gangster films, I mean the Italian mob kind of, we're talking about The Godfather, Casino, Goodfellas, whatever else. All The Irishman, of course, recently. They all seem to have a thing where there's not really a plot, it's just a bunch of people. They're all kind of more biopics rather than plot films. So it's kind of, you just watch a film where it's just telling a story of someone's life. Like, for example, recently I watched Come Done, which is the Martin Scorsese biopic about the Dalai Lama. And that also, similarly, doesn't really have a plot. Rather, it's just telling the story of the Dalai Lama's life. And in a similar way, these films, which, Martin Scorsese makes, and also, The Wolf of Wall Street is another good example, he does like to make these biopics, which tend to, by their nature, I think, not have as much of a coherent plot. And I think, that's often the case. And also a lot of times films kind of character studies. So overall, I think it's such a common thing to have in these gangster films that, if anything, I'm kind of surprised that it would even be of note that they were talking about it. Like that he went out and said, yeah, we decided to not really have a plot and just have it be all these little episodic gangster moments, because isn't that like what most of these films are like? I can't really, maybe I'm being an idiot.
Maybe this, you talk about most of these films, you're mentioning films that were filmed after Goodfellas.
That's to be fair. Yeah, the only other thing I'm thinking of is, the only other one I can really think of is The Godfather, which I think also doesn't really have a plot.
Well, I don't know. I haven't seen The Godfather in a while, but it's about, obviously...
I always, to be honest, I always get like, one of them's about some kind of club in Cuba, I think. But even then, I feel like, the thing is, those films are so long. Like, so long. How can they possibly have one plot running throughout them? But yeah, overall, I think it's quite a common thing for a lot of these films anyway, so I don't
maybe Scorsese made it common.
Yeah, but
Like,
in that
that's
case,
what-
it's kind of like when you buy a piece of a painting by one particular artist, and then you buy even more of his paintings until he becomes a very valuable, sought-after artist, and then suddenly everything you've done is worth more value. Like maybe in a different world where this was the only film that was episodic like this, would be like, oh, this is weird. But now Martin Scorsese made it so common that he kind of he did that hustle, and now everyone's just like, oh yeah, that's perfectly normal. So well done.
Yeah.
him.
Okay, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I see what you mean. I've seen The Irishman, and obviously The Irishman is incredibly similar to this in its structure, because it's basically following the same path as Goodfellas, about this guy who, has success early on and then ends his life in a miserable way. But yeah, so just a bit more on the structure. It was this reckless attitude towards convention that mirrored the attitude of many of the gangsters in the film. Scorsese remarked, "So, if you do the movie, you say, I don't care if there's too much narration, too many quick cuts. That's too bad. It's that kind of really punk attitude we're trying to show." He adopted a frenetic style to almost overwhelm the audience with images and information. He also put plenty of detail in every frame because he believed the gangster life is so rich. Freeze frames were used as Scorsese wanted images that stopped because a point was being reached in Henry Hill's life. So yeah, that's just a bit on, why he, or the style he did in this movie. Is it not really due to the plot, I guess, but of course, the style mixes in with the plot. And yeah, you do feel like, I think it's about an hour into the movie, an hour and 15 minutes, when Henry Hill's talking to Paulie, and Paulie's saying, "Hey, come on, you gotta go back to your wife. Go back to her. You have a vacation. You come back. We're all happy." Of course, then he gets thrown in jail.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I was looking at that, and I was thinking, oh, wow, we're an hour and 16 in. It has gone so fast up to this point. It really is like so energetic, and yes, it is it is a good theme when you're doing a movie about gangsters.
Yeah, and also drugs, as well.
Yeah, and drugs. Yes. He starts taking cocaine at that point in the movie as well. So yeah, it is meant to overwhelm the audience, and I guess obviously we've seen movies like this, and the 1990s. This movie is quite a prescient movie in terms of gangster films, but also in the style, and I think we've mentioned this with with other Scorsese movies. But yeah, this was something that has to be noted as quite revolutionary, I guess, at the time. Quite incredible at the time that he was doing this. I mean, 2.5 hours, that's a lot of time to cover. And yeah, like I said, it hardly ever slows down. So what do you think?
No, yeah, I think this film, it's very... Especially, I feel like comparing it to The Godfather again, I feel like one of the things which you have to appreciate is that you can forgive somebody for watching The Godfather and finding it, dare I say, a little bit boring. Another good example, actually, is the Sergio Leone film, Once Upon a Time in America, which is also a gangster film, also starring what's-his-face, Robert De Niro, and that's 4 hours, and it also feels long. This film, by contrast, really, it does not feel long at all, which is good, and I think it definitely makes it more exciting. It definitely makes it more rewatchable too. It's kind of one of those films where you can just you don't feel like you have to commit to it too much. And I guess the other thing is, in a way, you can pretty much, if you wanted to, pause and have a little break, if it's getting too much, because it's, every individual moment's kind of on its own. So I think it was a really good plan, and I think it does definitely make it enjoyable. I think it stands alone. I do think it is quite and I know we're going to get into this a bit later, but I think a lot of thematically dense films, I don't know if I feel like thematically dense might be a bit generous, but a lot of films with kind of quite substantial themes tend to sacrifice a lot of the pacing and the excitement for that. Whereas this film kind of, because the themes are in a way kind of related to how over the top and exciting it is, it's quite a nice combination. And I guess the problem is that's also where you get loads of people who like it for the wrong reason. But we like it for the right reason, and therefore we're allowed to appreciate that it is just an exciting, fun action gangster film. Yeah,
and I think we have to get into the reasons now, because here's the thing, it's very hard to talk about the plot in this movie, because it's the same as with The Irishman and all these episodic movies, even like The Wolf of Wall Street. It's just about a story of this guy's life, and there is no sort of it's not a traditional structure, so there is no we can talk specifically about this, or this is what should have happened, because it doesn't work like that. It's just, this is what happened in 1970, and now we're in 1978. Oh, he's robbing Lufthansa.
Yeah, like you think about, I don't know, like I don't know what's the first thing that comes to my head, maybe because of recent things being crazy, but Harry Potter, like for example, I think it's a very plot-based film, and a lot of my criticisms of the particularly later Harry Potter films is just I'll like talk about the plot. Like it's almost like if we were talking about one of those films, or Lord of the Rings, any kind of fantasy adventure film, I guess. Pirates of the Caribbean. Like when people talk about Pirates of the Caribbean and how the first Pirates of the Caribbean is great, they'll literally talk for ages about the plot and how well constructed the plot is and how well it all fits together and how well kind of the story tells you stuff and introduces you to the characters. In this film, you can't really do that because the plot isn't supposed to fit together really well. It's not supposed to be really well structured. It's just supposed to be like, oh yeah, then this thing happened, then this thing happened. So, and you can't even be like, so it's kind of, I guess that's not what the film's strength is. So it's not really criticism because it's like, the film's not trying to do that. In fact, the film's trying to accurately portray, seemingly accurately. I mean, we usually, when we do films which are based on real events, we talk about historical inaccuracy. But you very kindly informed me, I don't know why I say kindly, that this film has nothing really to say about historical inaccuracy. I assume it's probably not completely accurate. Like, obviously, I'm sure there is a degree of editorializing, but apparently it got pretty much everything pretty faithfully, and that makes sense why then it would just not really have a plot, because real life doesn't really have a plot. Yeah, exactly. Real life doesn't have a plot. That's a good thing to say. And the thing is, with biopics, you can have a plot, but when you're trying to take a whole look at the mafia and mobsters in general, and specifically focusing, of course, on this guy, Henry Hill, but also looking at Joe Pesci's character and Robert De Niro's character, then it's very hard to just talk about like the plot or what happens. So now I think we should get into the mafia, I guess, and just talk about. Yeah, let's join the mafia. Yeah, let's join the mafia because it looks like a great place. I always wanted to be a gangster. Yes, well, yeah, you can see why. You have fun, you have girls, treat with respect. There are no downsides. No, absolutely no downsides. The drugs are great. Yeah. It's the sauce. Yeah, the sauce. My mama's gabagool sauce. The sauce is the boss. That sounded like that was almost like Borat. Sauce is the boss. I thought that sounded like a grime. Like right, mate. Sauce is the boss. Exactly, that's what it sounded like. But anyway, so Michael, what are the two most important lessons in your life, or in life in general, not just your life? Don't be a rat. Yeah. I'm embarrassed to say I've forgotten the other one, but it's fine because I got half of them right. It's basically the same. It's shut your mouth. Don't rat on your friends. Yeah. I love it. Basically, just the same thing. Just don't talk to the police. So obviously there are some incredibly famous scenes. I still love the scene where he's introducing the audience to all of the gangsters. Like, here's Fat Andy and Frankie and Freddie. And they're all talking to us. Yeah, Pete the Killer. Hey, I took care of that thing for you. And just amazing. And Jimmy two times. Right, yeah. See, like in The Simpsons, they have those really kind of funny mobsters. Like they got Johnny Tightlips and Jimmy the Squealer. Yeah. You kind of think like what's his name, Jimmy Two Times. You feel like he should be a character from The Simpsons. Like, it was. How's it going, Fat Tony? Yeah, that scene there was just ripe for parodying or taking elements of that scene and the whole, these weird, wacky mobsters and how fun and colourful they are, and making fun of them. And it is why people are so fascinated with the mob, and because of Pete the Killer. I took care of that thing for you. I just love it. It's just so amazing. And obviously the long tracking shot through the Copacabana nightclub. There's an interesting story behind it. It all came about because of a practical problem. The filmmakers could not get permission to go in the short way. I'm not sure what that means, but anyway, this forced them to go. I guess maybe there was a there was probably because obviously it was quite a long way in because they had to go through this hallway and then through the kitchen and blah 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 blah. Yeah. So I guess that's what it means. Right? I guess the short way was a shorter way than that. Right. Yes. Okay. So this forced them to go round the back. Scorsese decided to film the sequence in one unbroken shot in order to symbolise that Henry's entire life was ahead of him, commenting, "It's his seduction of Karen, and it's also the lifestyle seducing him." The sequence was shot 8 times. That must have been just walking around this place for 8 times. Tell you what, though, that sequence was probably the thing that was shot the least times in this whole film. But yes, okay.
here's all the things I like about this movie in regards to the mafia. You can tell the mafia, or Italians in general, they really like food, don't they? They really like food. They absolutely love it.
Yeah, they are. That's why they're all so fat.
Yeah, it makes sense. But yeah, I guess the mafia, I want to say iconography. Maybe that's the best word to use. It all comes, well, it doesn't all come from this movie, because obviously there's also The Godfather. But a big reason why you have a TV show like The Sopranos, you have those characters in The Simpsons. Fat Tony, he's like not a major character, but he's not a minor character either. No. It's because of this movie, and why you still get, there's still a fascination today with Italian American gangsters, and it really does come from this movie and all of the little intricate details about the people and about the mafia, which you really get into detail with this. So we have to respect this movie massively for that. How much it.
Respect is very important in the business.
Yeah, it is very important. Respect is very important, and it is obviously on the Mount Rushmore of gangster movies for sure. So yeah, what do you have to say on that, Michael?
No, yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. I think this is it's a classic gangster movie, and I also think that definitely kind of it feels, I guess, quintessential in that a lot of the ideas of the characters and kind of having this idea of the characters, all the different nicknames and stuff like that is it's something that you think about when you think about gangster films. And I feel like that wasn't as prominent in The Godfather, for example, whereas it's a huge thing in this, that every single person, like, it's Frankie the Squealer.
Yeah, you're right. No,
he would have got whacked.
Yeah, for sure, he would have got whacked. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it made it like the Irishman today comes out, and we're all used to the Italian American gangster movies, and like there's the stereotype, and we even started this review by going, "Hey, I'm walking here," and all that stuff. And obviously, The Sopranos has had an influence, but again, The Sopranos doesn't happen if it isn't for Goodfellas, in my opinion. Even David Chase said it was influential, but in terms of it being such a success, like people knew about Italian Americans and the gangster life, I guess, because of Goodfellas. So that's why people were probably naturally interested. Yeah, it's just, you can't overstate how big a movie it is in terms of forming in people's heads the ideas around what the mafia is and making it, like fun as well. Like Johnny Tightlips and stuff like that, which it's really funny. It's great. It has a really important place in the culture of American TV and movies.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those films you've got to watch loads. One of the things I like about this film, one of the things I like about films in general, this is something I often look for in films that I approve of, and it's a certain degree of cynicism. I think that's always very interesting to me. A film which kind of shows you something, especially a film that sets up a certain grandeur around something and then tears it down. And I think this film does a really good job at that. And I think this is the aspect of the film which causes lots of people, this is the part where people miss the point, obviously, which we'll get into. But basically, this film, I mean, you start off, like literally right at the beginning, they do this massive murder where they're like stabbing this guy and they shoot this guy. It's a huge act of violence. And then you just hear the guy, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be a gangster. And it's kind of already establishing it. You've got that contrast between the idealized view of being a gangster directly in opposition to what they've just done of killing this person. So sets off right away. And then there are other examples of that. Like one of the things I liked about this is they have lots of scenes, I think, dedicated to people trying to morally justify their actions. I think that's something you see a lot, and it's really interesting when you look at it. For like, you got stories like how this guy who basically he loves robbing people is called Jimmy the Gentleman, and and it's like, oh, people were fine with it, and then it kind of just goes up like, oh, and if they weren't, we just roughed them up and it was fine, like kind of almost as like an afterthought. And then obviously you get his wife who's like, oh, it kind of felt like normal because everyone else is just out there being lazy, whereas he's working really hard to get his money. He's like a guy who's a real go-getter, things like that. You've obviously got the fact that they kind of enable Tommy's terrible behavior, and then, they literally do just all the time. And then they act surprised, one, when he does like violent things, like obviously he shoots the guy Spider. And then also Jimmy is surprised when Tommy gets killed, which I think just shows kind of the level of delusion they're operating on. That's like such an obvious thing. And the other thing I liked, okay, so you already mentioned the rule is you don't rat people out. And of course, how does the film end? He rats everyone out. And yet, what I like about it is the lack of internal self-awareness within the film. And I guess this is going back to what I've already said about one of the things I really like in films, which is a film which presents something and then doesn't offer an internal moral critique because it trusts the audience to make that critique for us. Like, the film doesn't really at any point acknowledge properly. I mean, I think it kind of does it to just about an extent where some guy says, but you're a rat. But apart from that, it kind of feels like the film never really, I don't think, hammers home just how much he's completely gone against the number one thing he was taught, the number one thing you're supposed to learn, the biggest thing we're told about being a gangster, which is that you don't rat anyone out, you don't, call out your friends and like get them in trouble and blah, 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 blah. And he literally just completely abandons it. And obviously there is the moment where somebody is like, oh, so you're a rat, are you? But literally that's said by some character we hardly even know, just like somebody off to the side. And then at the end, he's like kind of opining about how sad he is that he's not going to get to be a gangster anymore. It's like, oh, I just got to be an average schmuck. And it's like, you literally just completely abandon the entire principles of what you set up. So that was that. I mean, I've got like another thing, but do you want to just jump in before I, because I've been saying a lot, but it's like something which is very common throughout the film.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah. I guess it symbolizes just the end of the mafia, I guess. Like, he's just abandoning its ideals and just saying, fuck it. And that was obviously a big deal. What he did, he brought down like 50 people in 1980. Yeah. So, yeah, like it's symbolic, I guess. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, and then my last one was just the Maury character. I think he's really interesting because, and I don't know, like, I think this is what the film is trying to get across. It might just be the case of, like, this is what I got out of it, but even if this is what I got out of it, that's fine. That's good enough for me. Basically, Maury, he had every right to complain and be pissed off because he set up this thing. He was the one who gave them the tip, and they're all giving, everyone else is getting money, everyone else is spending all their money, everyone else is being, and Maury's just like, I just need this money, I really need the money, and they're just like, screwing with him. They're like not giving him the money. They're saying, oh, you're going to get your money. They're lying to him. And then obviously they just kill him because they don't want to give him the money. And the point being, one of the things they also said, like, oh, the mafia, it's about respect. It's about doing what you need to do. It's about paying your dues. It's about, kind of giving tribute to people who deserve it. And yet you've got this guy, Maury, who does set all this stuff up for them. And they're like, and he's like, give me the money. I need the money because, I set this up for you. You wouldn't have any of this money for me, which is a completely fair argument for him to make. And he's understandably annoyed that everyone else is being given the money. He's not being given any money. And then they just kill him. And again, it kind of just shows that these guys, they're not noble. They're not like reasonable. There's no, giving people their dues involved in this. It's just, they're just scum who are just like, oh, well, we can just screw with this guy. He gave us this massive solid tip that got us all loads of money, but he's not powerful. No one cares about him. We can just kill him. And I think, again, the film does not really offer an internal critique of that. You kind of just go, oh yeah, and to be honest, I feel like if you're watching this film and you're not really thinking about it, you would just see things from their point of view. Be like, yeah, that Maury guy, he is really annoying. But obviously what you see is like, these guys are dickheads. They're not like good people. And I think, to me, that was just an example that really stood out of just like, of how much this idea of the mafia is some kind of noble organization that's, all about respect and giving people what they deserve and stuff like that. And, like, we're just, sure, our business is a bit illegitimate, but they're still, we're nice to each other. We don't screw people around unless we have a good reason to. No, they're just dickheads. And I like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was the major change from The Godfather. It's portraying the mafia as these people who are just, like you said, dickheads. They're not like honourable. They don't care about respect. They'll just fuck you over. And you have like Paulie, who's the main guy, who's like kind of the old mafia type, who's like Vito Corleone in The Godfather.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously, he gets fucked at the end, and he can't stop the Lufthansa heist. He can't stop the cocaine being trafficked around the country by Henry. So yeah, it is kind of like, oh yeah, this is how the mafia are actually like.
It's no mafia for old men.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so let's get into now, Michael, because you talked about the mafia and how it portrays the, it's meant to portray. Obviously, it starts off portraying the mafia as glamorous, and then you get into it, and you're like, oh, it's not really that glamorous, is it? And that kind of links into what we're saying, what I'm going to say here with the American Dream theme. Should I like that rhyme? The American Dream theme.
Yeah, that's good. Dream theme.
Good. Yeah. Anyway, so as you mentioned, very famous line in the movie. As far back as I can remember, I wanted to be a gangster. And obviously, like you said, he says this after he's shooting a body at the side of a motorway in the dark. Not very glamorous. And then you have, obviously, the opening credits and the song in the background about wanting to be a millionaire, wanting to make it big. And there is this Scorsese trait in his movies that all the protagonists want to live this American dream. if you think about America, it's seen as a land of opportunity. Throughout the history of America, you look at immigrants coming over from the continent of Europe, or nowadays maybe Asia, and trying to find a place to make a living and pursue that American dream. And you see right from the start, Henry Hill, he wants respect, he wants a good life, he wants a good job, he wants to be somebody. All things that are promised by the American dream. And I thought it was interesting that his dad came from Ireland, and it's probably for the same reasons as him wanting to make it big in America. So obviously this movie starts off in the 50s, where the American dream, it's near its peak, and it gets to its peak probably in the 60s, the most prosperous country in the world. And you see Henry Hill making more money than most of the adults in his neighborhood, and he's 13 years old. He's like, oh, it's a glorious time. Before Crazy Joe decided to take on a boss and start a war. He says that in 63. So I'm not quite sure about my mafia history, but apparently there was a war that was started.
Classic.
Kind of coincides with the Vietnam War in terms of the American dream. That kind of nice parallel there. But anyway, in
coincides
63,
with Crazy Joe Biden.
his start in politics. Yes, he said in 63, if we wanted something, we took it. He's living the dream, eating all the nice foods. He has a wife, a lot of money, a lot of respect. But of course, the reason why he is enjoying this, all of the nice food, the front row seats to watch this Rodney Dangerfield-esque comedian, all these nice singers at the Cabana Club, is because he has cut corners, and he literally says it himself. We cut corners. We're not like the schmucks who are going on the subway every day. Like they just couldn't understand it, and the implication is that, or in this movie, the message about the American dream is the only way you can have success in America is this, cutting corners. That's how blue collar guys who aren't the smartest, that's what his wife says about him, can have nice lives. How they don't want to be a sucker. They want to live these incredibly nice lives, nice home, nice car. They can drink nice wine, all of that stuff. And I think this is something that Scorsese puts in a lot of his movies, and in Goodfellas. I think if ambition, I guess, is the American dream, it's about ambition, striving to make yourself better, to reach the top, and that's meant to be a trait that is American. Then why does it often lead to what Henry Hill's doing, which is killing people? Or you look at Jordan Belfort in The Wolf of Wall Street, what he does. Yeah, he does some pretty fucked up things as well. And in a system like America, where only so many can succeed, you can't succeed without fucking people over, and sometimes actually not metaphorically, like shooting them, or bashing their head. That is sometimes required as well.
Yeah,
so
you've got to bury a few bodies.
Yeah, exactly. And that is something that I think he is saying about the American dream here. That if this is the life you want, then this is how you have to be basically a real bad guy. You have to join the mafia. You have to do all this shit. And it's obviously it's revealed later on, but it's not, the mafia isn't that glamorous at all. But if you want this glamorous lifestyle, you're going to have to do pretty bad things. So, what do you think about that, Michael?
I think you're right. That is kind of it. And I do think this film, it does feel very much reminiscent of The Wolf of Wall Street. I think there are loads and loads of parallels in terms of just the, narration, the fact that it's about a guy who wants to enter into a particular industry because he has this idealized view of it. And then ultimately you see that it's actually kind of terrible. And then in the end, the character ends up kind of in an all right situation at the end, but at the cost of what they ultimately went into, whatever industry they're in for. So that's kind of, basically one of the things that certainly, I can't know if Martin Scorsese does that in many of his other films, but he certainly does it in this one. And I think it's definitely a really good criticism of the American culture in general. I think maybe you could say, in a weird way, this film, it's not exactly criticizing the American dream, because I think you could make an argument that it's not necessarily that you have to do this, but I think that I guess maybe it is a criticism, but it's kind of not necessarily an absolute criticism. The criticism would be that the American dream makes this kind of idea desirable to some people. But then obviously you could say, well, it still allows for the possibility that you could go about achieving the American dream in a more legitimate way. The problem with the American dream is that, not necessarily that it forces people into a situation, but rather that it leaves that option open, and that when you look at the justifications a lot of people are using for their actions in a lot of these films where they have morally dubious actions, it is basically American dream logic that it's saying, well, it's about being somebody, making something of yourself, being from rags to riches, working hard. And that's the thing. I can imagine these guys are kind of like that basically, if you're money motivated, that's good. And you think about how a lot of people in America, they work really long hours, especially compared to Europe. It's like a thing. And I feel like a lot of these mobsters also would work very long hours. And it's kind of just this thing where they're completely committed to. And I think when you're inundated with the American work ethic, it would make sense that one of the ways that might manifest itself is, I'm going to give 110% in my job as a gangster. So yeah, I do feel like you can definitely say that the mafia as it's portrayed in this film definitely emanates from a lot of the ideals of the American dream. So yeah, you're right. And also, yeah, that does obviously relate to the fact that immigrants, and of course people immigrate to America with similar ideas in mind.
Yeah, it's if you want to achieve the American dream, if you're a guy like Henry Hill, you have to do really horrible stuff.
Yeah, it's like they say in the famous West Side Story, everything's right in America if you are white in America.
Yeah, I guess so. It's Italian Americans white.
I don't know. Well, yeah, who knows? They can be anything.
Yeah,
it depends on whether or not they're bad or not. Those are the rules. When they're having like a bad moment, then they're not white.
Okay, so yeah, and obviously he has to do these horrible things, and eventually, because he's in the mafia, and it has to run out. You can't keep doing this forever, and that's of course what happens. He has to then live the rest of his life as a schmuck, and this is just from Wikipedia again. Henry's last day as a wise guy was the hardest part of the film for Scorsese to shoot, because he wanted to properly show Henry's state of anxiety, paranoia, and racing thoughts caused by cocaine and amphetamines intoxication. In an interview with movie critic Mark Cousins, Scorsese explained the reasons for Pesci shooting at the camera at the end of the film. Well, that's a reference right to the end of The Great Train Robbery. That's the way it ends, that film, and basically the plot of this picture is very similar to The Great Train Robbery. It hasn't changed 90 years later. It's the same story. The gunshots will always be there. He's always going to look behind his back. He's got to have eyes behind his back, because they're going to get him someday, which is very similar to The Sopranos, the Sopranos ending. I don't know if you know about that.
It ends mid-sentence.
Yeah, it ends with Tony looking up mid-sentence, and the idea is, because he's living this life, he doesn't know if the person walking through the door is going to be a member of his family, or is it going to be somebody who wants to shoot him and kill him. He's always, living that life. He never knows.
Or it's just like in It Follows, where it ends with them walking along and somebody's following behind them, and you don't know whether or not it's going to be the monster or just a random person.
Yeah, that's just to scare you. This is a thing.
Are you saying that gangsters aren't scary?
Well, every day could be his last. That's the point. If he's living this life, and when there's like things on Instagram, on Twitter, like motivational people saying live every day like it's your last day, mafia people should take that to heart more than anyone else. The director ended the film with Henry regretting that he is no longer a wise guy, about which Scorsese said, "I think the audience should get angry at him, and I would hope they do, and maybe with the system which allows this." So yeah, that's definitely the system which allows this. That's what I'm thinking what he's getting at with the American dream. It's like, if he can be that successful doing this, isn't that a bunch of bullshit? How is that allowed to happen in America? But yeah, then again though, you'd say, well, that's the only way somebody like Henry can have a good life, unfortunately. So yeah, it's the system which has created somebody like Henry. The fact that he even wanted to join the mob in the first place, because that is the only way he could achieve the quote-unquote American dream, which many immigrants strive to. And so the fact that a young kid wanted to be a gangster instead of president of the United States, well, maybe that's a problem with America. That's what I think he's trying to say. But so I wouldn't really say the audience should get angry with him, because you know me, Michael, and you as well. We don't really like to get angry at specific people. Obviously, there's some real dickheads, but we like to critique systems more.
Yeah, man, we're just like above all that crap.
We are above all that crap. We recognise, that People are just people. They will do stupid things, so you got to mitigate for that. They're going to do horrible things, so you got to do stuff. You got to that throws morality out the window and just focuses on how people actually act. And if a guy like Henry Hill is joining the mafia, and that he sees that as his best life, well, that's a big issue right there. And so that is what Scorsese, I think, is saying at the end. What do you think?
No, yeah. Basically, I think that's it. Yeah. I kind of would agree. I think you can be. I wouldn't say necessarily angry with him. I'd say frustrated, because I do think this is a film where the main character does not learn the lesson of the film. It's kind of like in the whole Pixar thing, where like the famous Pixar thing is the want versus need paradigm, where it's the character starts off with something they want, and then they realize in the end what it is that they need. That's supposed to be the way that Pixar writes a lot of their films, and it's apparently a very good way to write a film. This film's like that, except the character doesn't realize at the end that what they want isn't what they need, and they still, even at the end of the film, are like, man, I wish I was still a gangster, though, failing to realize that lots of terrible things that happen to them are because they were a gangster, and that also the only reason they were able to escape a negative fate is because they had completely abandoned all the principles that they upheld as moralistically valuable with regards to being a gangster. So I think you can definitely be frustrated with the character, but obviously I also think that certainly what Martin Scorsese is saying there and what you're saying there is that, yes, the system is really what's to blame.
Yeah, it's kind of... I do think it's kind of maybe making fun or poking fun at the audience at the end.
Yeah.
He hasn't learned the lessons, and Scorsese was probably thinking at the time it's going to... the audience watching the movie is not going to learn the lessons. They're just going to be sitting back and going, oh man, can't he be a gangster again and go back to doing cool stuff? Can't he just do that? That was so fun for me to watch. Instead of, obviously, the life of a gangster inevitably leads to you doing pretty... I mean, think about it. He ends the movie in just the worst state ever. Fucking high on drugs. Yeah.
So here's a fun story. Now you mention it. Do you know, because I was thinking about... This guy, obviously, it's based on a real person. I was thinking about Jordan Belfort, who, of course, who she's based on. Do you know how much money Jordan Belfort is worth today?
No, I don't.
He's worth minus 97 million. Because negative 97 million, because he still owes the US government 97 million for the penalties for the fraud he committed. Mm-hmm. So basically, what I'm saying is, crime doesn't pay, kids.
Well, that's the thing. Crime. That's the message, I guess, of this movie. Or if you're part of the mafia, crime doesn't pay. But if we're, this isn't a Wolf of Wall Street review, but obviously the thing in the Wolf of Wall Street is he kind of gets, he gets away with it at the end. He goes to a fine prison and he's giving speeches afterwards about how to sell stuff. And that's kind of a change that whenever we do Wolf of Wall Street, we can talk about the difference in the
that's going to be fun. Good old Wolf. I was going to try and abbreviate it. We've got to work on that before we do it so we can say it quicker.
Maybe it's the fact that he's being in the mafia is different to being on Wall Street, and because of Wall Street's influence in politics, and generally its power, that you can live the life of a Jordan Belfort and get away with it, and that isn't the case it wasn't the case with the mafia in the 70s and 80s. Maybe it was before then, but of course, in the life of Henry Hill, when we get, he says at the end of the movie, it's over. It's over. We all went to jail, and that's kind of the same thing with the mafia. Like, it's over. It's done. All these mobsters, they don't have power anymore, like they did in the 50s or the 60s. It's done, and therefore he faces the consequences for it. So now we'll move on to another message of the movie, which is a discussion about masculinity, or how destructive masculinity can be. So I think this message is best embodied in the Joe Pesci character. Because Joe
Pesci is such an alpha male.
Yeah, exactly. He's very small, so he's constantly concerned about getting humiliated, emasculated, and constantly trying to prove himself. Shooting people all the time, not thinking it's a big deal. I like the scene where he's angry that his girlfriend said Sammy Davis Jr. was attractive.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah.
And then,
imagine dating this guy. Maybe he doesn't beat women. Maybe that's the one line he doesn't cross. But based on him, imagine how are you saying I'm funny at the moment, but with like a girlfriend. You'd be like, the girlfriend's like, you're funny. He's like, what do you mean funny?
Yeah. No, he never actually has
like serious girlfriend.
Yeah, he just dates like women on and off.
Yeah. Maybe it's because he kills them. They're literally what Joe Pesci, you're so big. You know, like when they're making love or whatever, and he's like, you know, because Joe Pesci looks like, you know, the guy with a big dick, and he's like, what do you mean big? Big like I'm fat? Big like I got a big head? Like I got a big ego? What are you saying?
Yes, he is so insecure, and of course that is a defining trait.
Incel.
Yes, no, it's a defining trait of toxic masculinity, as I have learned from Twitter. But yeah, so I also like the girlfriend at the end says, he's so jealous. If I look at anyone else, he'll kill me. Yeah,
classic men.
Mene. So well, let's get into that, because obviously, when you talk about Goodfellas, there is a critique from people who are feminist. Now it is a good time then to look at an article called Goodfellas at 30, Martin Scorsese's damning study of masculinity. So this was written about 3 days ago, because that's when the anniversary was of Goodfellas, the 30-year anniversary. So I'm going to read pretty much all of it here. It's in The Guardian by a guy called Guy Lodge. I think I've read one of his articles before. I can't quite remember. While the acclaimed 1990 gangster drama has been viewed by some as a bro fantasy, a closer look shows an elegant and brutal dissection of male ego. Are you excited about this, Michael?
Yes, I am, Luke. You know, I'm really, I think I'm ready for it, especially by a guy called Guy. He sounds like a real alpha, you know. Sounds like he's going to be like, hey fellas, let me tell you something about the male ego, yo. Sounds like he, you know, has been crushing the gym.
Okay. A few weeks ago, as if inadvertently anticipating its 30th anniversary, Goodfellas found itself the unlikely subject of a Twitter flame war, kicked off by one non-admiring podcaster's viral tweet. Really sucks that every time you start dating a new guy, you're basically signing up to take a Film Theory 101 class of his making, vented Dana Donnelly. You know how many guys named Matt... And this is so funny because Matt's just the most common name ever, but whatever.
Yeah.
You know how many guys named Matt have given me an hour-long lecture on Goodfellas? Replies range from tell me about it, agreement to hashtag not all men indignation, to the not unreasonable suggestion that she should stop dating guys named Matt.
Well, to be fair, I would say yes all men, because Goodfellas is great, and all men love it, because all men appreciate true quality.
Yeah, like it's a guy who's cool, and then yes, at the end of the movie he's slightly less cool, but how can you not love that?
Yeah.
No, but here's the thing about this, it's a bro movie, like, so I don't get how somebody could go on an hour, you know, rant, or I guess an hour class about Goodfellas and not talk about dissecting the movie, about how actually it shows how the mob isn't glamorous, it shows how the American dream is futile. It shows how it just rips apart masculinity. Like, it can't just be an hour of someone saying to Dana Donnelly, "Oh yeah, I love Goodfellas. It's such a cool movie."
Yeah, I've seen this, just like acting out every single scene. Just like there's one scene where it's like, "What do you mean funny?" And the guy's like, "I'm just saying funny." He's like, "What do you mean funny?" Just like that for an hour.
Yeah,
and the guy's like, "Oh, what the fuck do you mean when I say I'm funny?"
Yeah, okay, if it's a Film Theory 101 class, then it's got to be like actually delving into why it's not a bro fantasy. So if you're getting an hour-long lecture on Goodfellas, surely that's it. And therefore, if you talk about how it rips into the idea of, you know, the male ego, surely that you'd like that. You'd be like, yes, because I'm a feminist and I'm a woman and all of that. Yes, isn't that great? And how people don't get it. And that's the. I assume that, I don't know who Dana Donnelly is, but I assume that's kind of with the kind of tweet she's tweeted. That's kind of how she feels. Yeah, so yeah. I don't. What are these men talking about for an hour-long lecture on Goodfellas that she would not like? I don't understand.
Yeah,
I really don't get it. But anyway, I'll continue on with the article. But in the process, as is the want of Twitter discourse, the subject at hand got flattened and simplified on all sides. Scorsese's 1990 gangster film wound up portrayed as an immutably masculine cultural object and criticised and defended on those terms. Yeah, but that's the thing. How is it getting criticised and defended on those terms when that's not the point of the movie? Yeah. And if people are getting into an hour-long lecture on Goodfellas, how does that not come up? I don't understand.
It just goes to show, like, I have a theory here that Twitter is not a good. I know that you're talking about the conversations people are having, but I feel definitely Twitter is going to make Like, imagine trying to explain to somebody like how a film is good via Twitter, like a complicated film. But yeah, to be fair, like these, I mean, genuinely, like what you're saying about the whole hour-long conversation is just like, it's just crazy. I mean, I can imagine
a 5-minute conversation of Goodfellas. It's so cool that there's so many great scenes. I just love it. De Niro's amazing, and just like a very boilerplate like review of Goodfellas you'd get from any person. But again, if you're going into detail about Goodfellas and doing film theory, then you should be, the fact that it's a masculine cultural object, that idea should be mocked in that lecture because of actually the themes that comes out of Goodfellas. So again, it is just fucking. It's crazy, and I don't understand. But anyway, we'll continue with the article. Donnelly was, of course, far from the first person to characterize Goodfellas as such. The film has been a staple of movies for men lists for years, while its unasked for reputation in that respect was underlined in a 2015 notorious think piece by right-wing New York Post critic Kyle Smith that began with the headline, "Women are not capable of understanding Goodfellas." And got somehow more...
It's called Goodfellas, not Good Ladies.
Exactly, and somehow got more obnoxious from there. The film, he argued, was a male fantasy picture. Entourage with guns instead of swimming pools. The Rat Pack minus tuxedos. Which, it starts off like that, but the point of the movie is life is not actually like that. It doesn't actually end up like that. And so, for example, Donnelly, she probably would have used this article in her defense, and various other people agreeing with her. Look at this. Women are not capable of understanding Goodfellas. That shows it's just a bro movie that, it's not for women, But, obviously, Kyle Smith is wrong. So, I don't know if she's seen Goodfellas or not. I imagine not, or she has and she doesn't get it, like all the male people she's mocking. Because how can you, you just see, women are not capable of understanding Goodfellas, and you immediately laugh it off. Like, oh, you're so stupid. Like this Kyle Smith guy. He's so stupid. How can he say something like that and not understand that the actual movie is mocking the point of view that he has? But anyway, we'll continue. Others might mean that description damningly. Smith wrote it as a fan. Some women, to his surprise, might even share his enthusiasm for such things. Yes, I agree. I think this movie is not a male movie. And this is what Guy Lodge says next. Since Goodfellas is no male fantasy picture, and reading it as such requires such selective viewing that you may as well begin and end with the poster that has, yes, graced a lot of dorm room walls. As far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to be a gangster, runs its tagline, picking up the Henry Hill Jr. quote that is also spoken in the film's opening minutes. There's your male fantasy right there, but it's one that Scorsese film dismantles with brutal elegance, along with a brand of masculinity that subscribes to it. Yes, he's completely right. That is what this movie does. You see, fucking Henry Hill. He's a big man. He beats up this guy who touches his girlfriend inappropriately, and he's takes his girlfriend to nice.
So he's a feminist. Is what I'm hearing. He's like, excuse me, consent can be withdrawn at any time.
Yeah. Gives her money to go shopping, gets a blowjob from it. He's a masculine man. And at the end of the movie, he's crying in a corner with her as he hasn't got the money to survive. He's lost his last $60,000 of cocaine. So, yeah, he's in the corner sobbing away and realizing that he's fucked up his life. Anyway, you might think otherwise if you were to watch real of famous highlights from Scorsese's brilliantly immersive, kinetic biopic of Hill, the Irish-Italian-American mobster who spent 25 years in the service of New York's Lucchese crime family, only to become an FBI informant. Its most celebrated scenes are indeed alluring ones, beginning with that cornerstone sequence, much taught in the foundational film studies classes that provoke such eye-rolling from the likes of Donnelly, that plunges us into the mafia world via a snaking, unbroken Steadicam shot as the adult Hill guides his new girlfriend through the sharp dress, bustle and glitter of the Copacabana nightclub. It echoes an earlier long take shot from the younger Hill's awestruck point of view that introduces his mob elders into the rosy aspral glow of a cocktail lounge. So yeah, those are the most famous scenes, and they're brilliantly shot, and they're famous. But yeah, again, this is... I hate to bang on about this, but it is a case of those shots are the start, and then by the end of the movie, look what's happened to him. He's paranoid, he's looking up at helicopters, he's constantly fucked because of the drugs he's taking. It doesn't end well for him. But, as Guy Lodge says, that's the bait. It's over 2.5 hours, Scorsese puts equally vivid work into The Switch, the light hardens. The editing shifts gears from slow, hypnotic showmanship to nervous twitchiness. The violence gets uglier. Even the music progresses from woozy soul and girl group pop to clanging, discordant 70s rock, surrendering into the cacophony of Sid Vicious's My Way over the closing credits. Hill's life, accordingly, goes from a communal naughty boys club fantasy to a spiraling coke-addled socially abandoned fuck-up, a climactic sequence detailing a hazy day of collapsing errands, culminating in Hill's arrest under the roar of helicopters. It's as electrifyingly shot and shaped as those earlier welcome scenes, but you wouldn't want to be caught inside the screen for one sweaty, suffocating second of it. If Entourage ever pulled the rug out from under its characters this ruthlessly, I missed the episode. Yeah, that's true. I mean, people, compare this to Entourage because that is the ultimate like bro TV series, and there is no, actually it's about this thing with Entourage. It's about a group of bros having a good time.
Yeah,
and that's all it is. It's very simple. And if people think that Goodfellas is like that, they're really fucking dumb. That goes for the women who criticize Goodfellas. And that goes for the right-wing men who are like, oh no, Goodfellas is great, shut the fuck up, I love it, it's a classic male movie.
Everyone's dumb.
Everyone's dumb apart from me, Michael, and the people who agree with me.
Yes.
So, yes. Scorsese's filmmaking in Goodfellas acts as a double-edged sword. It stokes romantic macho ideals and mocks them with a single cut. Before it exploded into the world, the not remotely matched gold standard for mob movies had been Francis Ford Coppola's Godfathers, which used stoic, somber rigour and ritual to present the mafia as fascinating in a world of closed doors and secrets, like the Freemasons. Goodfellas, by contrast, wielded any amount of formal flash and sizzle to show how easy that realm was to infiltrate at the subject's peril. Hill was nobody special, briefly made to feel otherwise by a signed-in blood members club. As he says in the film's pitch-perfect dream-busting closing line, I get to live the rest of my life like a schnook. Which I thought it was schmuck at first, but it's schnook apparently.
Schnook? I've never heard. You mean like Snooki, the person from what's it called, Jersey Shore?
Yeah, yes. What Scorsese and Coppola's films have in common is that they're routinely branded as men's movies, despite doing less than sterling PR for the gender. Goodfellas, in turn, plainly planted the seeds for David Chase's TV series, The Sopranos, a saga which paid equal attention to the bleak, bloody, self-serving antics of criminal men and the exhausted woman caught in their crossfire. It too gets routinely broken down to just its masculine bada-bing iconography in vanished, shallow-focused tributes. I remember that there was this meme going around. It was about a month ago, and actually probably like a couple of weeks ago, and it was this meme of like a picture of The Sopranos, like a DVD cover, and some guy just looking at it and going, ha, bada bing, like that, or gabagool. And then there's loads of signs over his head, like arrows over his head, going like, shows how toxic masculinity is, shows how awful the mafia is, etc. Like all these themes just going over this guy's head, and he's just staring at it and going, ah, bada bing. And yeah, like there is a serious disconnect, and it's so evident on Twitter between like people who think like The Sopranos or Goodfellas, and there's probably some other movies which people, I mean, we talked about fucking Clueless a few weeks ago, and that's kind of the female version of that, I feel like, because there are women who are like, oh, I love Clueless, even though it's kind of critiquing what they love. And yeah, this is the same with Goodfellas. It's men who are like, oh, I love Goodfellas, but it's actually critiquing what they love. But the difference is you don't have to be stupid if you're a woman. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to be stupid analysing Clueless either. But I guess the thing is, you don't have to be stupid. You can see, like, oh, people like this for the wrong reasons. Of course, that is subjective, but I do believe that is the case. Like, that so many people apparently like Goodfellas for the wrong reasons, and I hope that, people understand its true message, and if they did, they'd actually like it. Which shows to me that people who don't like it haven't watched the movie or aren't smart enough to grasp its concepts. So, I'm glad Daniel Donnelly didn't like that hour lecture from a guy called Matt who talks about how great Goodfellas is. Because if she then clearly doesn't think Goodfellas has a good message or is a good movie, and therefore she deserves all the hour-long film theory 101 lectures she has coming to her. That's my opinion, Michael.
What a
I know, right?
mansplainer.
What do you think?
No, yeah, basically, I think I pretty much agree with you that it's true that this is, and I am trying to think of another example of this, because I'm sure it is a thing you get a lot of the time with films. I guess it's not quite the same, actually, now I think about it, because I don't think it works as well. I was going to say, one example I can think of would be 300, how a lot of people don't seem to pick up that it's intentionally supposed to be an exaggerated, nationalistic account from the Spartan perspective, and that's why all of the pro-Spartan stuff is really over the top. But that's not, it's not quite as sophisticated a theme, so it doesn't really count. But I do think a lot of people just go 300. That's cool. Anyway, I would say, yeah, basically that's it. It definitely makes sense to me that people can watch this and be like, yeah, I really like it because it's cool. But I don't understand. I agree with you. I don't understand how anyone can have watched this film and have strong opinions about this film and yet not think about themes at all. Although it is shocking because, there are... I always think back to when I saw a hour-long review of... Or not necessarily a review. See, the good thing about it is it wasn't scripted. Well, I guess it's actually more accurate because it's an hour-long guy ranting about Arrival, and literally he doesn't mention a single one of the themes in Arrival. The only thing he's talking about, the only substance of his rant at all, is nitpicks about the actions people take in relation to aliens existing, which is you can point that out, but it should be the only thing you're talking about. And literally talking is Arrival's bad, never mind the fact that it's got fantastic cinematography and really interesting themes and really interesting characters. It's stupid because that's not how aliens would really be, or that's not how humanity would really react if there was an alien, which I think is stupid anyway, because I think Arrival does a really good job at showing a realistic. But anyway, the point being, I feel like maybe some people do the reverse of that, but for Goodfellas, where instead of an hour-long guy complaining about a really thematically dense, interesting film, ignoring all the themes, it's an hour-long guy lauding a film, but never ever mentioning any of the interesting things, just being like, oh man, it's so cool, it's so interesting. I guess the thing is, I kind of blame Tarantino, because I think Tarantino, his films are very much style over substance, and I like Tarantino, but I don't love Tarantino, and I think basically Tarantino kind of introduced the idea of making films where
things can just be cool, basically, and there's no subtext to it.
Plot doesn't have to be well crafted. The characters don't necessarily even have to be sophisticated or interesting, as long as the dialogue is really good and the visuals are really entertaining, not necessarily even well shot, but just entertaining. Although I do think Tarantino does do well shot things, but kind of just as long as they're really exciting and the action's really cool and things like that. And I can imagine the thing is you could probably get somebody talking for an hour about how Reservoir Dogs is a really good film, and that's fine. But the thing is, Reservoir Dogs doesn't really have any themes.
You would be correct to complain about that if you were David Donnelly, at least more than Goodfellas.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Or even Pulp Fiction. I think Pulp Fiction is a good film because I really like the dialogue and stuff, but I don't think it's got anything as much there. So I feel like probably what you're getting is people who... I'm guaranteeing all of these guys who are massive fans of Goodfellas, but if you spoke to them about it, would not mention any of the subtext or the themes, are definitely huge Tarantino fans. There is no way that's not the case.
But I just don't understand how you could go on an hour-long lecture without talking about that.
Yeah, and also, presumably you'd have to have watched it, loads of times.
Yeah,
picked it up.
Just maybe that is the case. But I also... So we've ragged on Dana Donnelly, and she deserves it, but there's also this other argument, which is from the right wing, which, of course, we picked from Kyle Smith, who said, Goodfellas is great, just completely not getting it in kind of the same way Dana Donnelly has. And you sent me a tweet which was kind of in the same vein from this guy who said, can't we just enjoy Goodfellas? Tweeting out this article. You sent it to me on Skype, I believe, and I'll get it up now to see what the caption was. But yeah, it's just, look, people sure can just enjoy movies and they don't have to analyze everything. But, movies aren't just movies. If you want to analyze it, people can. And so here's...
Yeah, I think you should read my hilarious comment too, because how funny it was.
Well, I'll read the tweet and then you can see your hilarious comment. So this is from James Morrow, who I saw works at the Telegraph, a right-wing newspaper. Can't we just enjoy a damn near perfect film? Does everything have to turn into a damning study of masculinity? And that is so funny, because it's a damn near perfect film, because it is a damning study of masculinity. Yeah. And it just proves to me that, and there's this comment on The Guardian as well, the first comment. Damning study of male masculinity. Why does The Guardian dissect everything? It's a top-notch gangster film. End of. And it's why dissect anything, really? Why just... Yeah, why is it a top-notch gangster? But this is what I think these people this guy who commented and James Morrow are like, they don't get it. They don't get it. And that's the thing. They say, well, let's not dissect it. The fact that they don't get it, they don't get the point, shows the need to dissect it. The need to get into detail, because clearly these guys just don't have a clue. Maybe they're, certainly James Morrow, maybe he's being performatively dumb. But yeah, it like, you need, if you don't get that, yes, this movie is a damning study of masculinity, then you should need to read an article about it. You do need to dissect it, because you clearly haven't gotten it. You haven't gotten the point. So yeah, that is equally as frustrating, and probably even more so, but maybe not, I don't know, as what Dana Donnelly said. But go on, Michael.
No, yeah. I mean, I think it's like a wise man once said, I only enjoy movies with my ankle to make sure that it's as far away from my brain as possible, lest I think about it. It is, I mean, the point I was making with that hilarious comment is that it is funny that a lot of people will think that the process of thinking about a film and deliberating on what a film is trying to say is a distinct process to the process of enjoying a film. And that's really weird and concerning. The idea that it's like you've got thinking about a film and then you've got enjoying a film. And it's like, well, shouldn't you be enjoying a film because you're thinking about it and what it's trying to say and stuff like that? I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's people who you almost want to say don't view films as a medium. They just view them as like a thing. That, you know, like, there's obviously a medium is trying to say something.
You know, if that's the case,
like,
if you view as just a thing to enjoy them, fine, but just don't comment on them and just say, can't stop doing this. You know, just
yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, if you enjoy it, that's fine.
And the fact,
you're wrong.
You know, and again, if you're making a point about it, like, look at how people are dissecting it, and, you know, look at the Guardian at it again. It just shows how anti-intellectual you are, I guess, and that is, unfortunately, I say fortunately, it's naturally the case that the right wing is inherently anti-intellectual, you know, and these tweets like this.
Actually, you know what? It reminds you of something where there was a whole thing. I'm not reading it into basically a guy. I think his name's Jack Saints. Who's done some videos about analysis, and essentially the substance of the video. He made a video where it's basically complaining about people who do overly long analysis on YouTube. But the point he made was that he said that some channels do really interesting long analysis, and he lists some examples like Lindsay Ellis and Folding Ideas and things like that. And then he says, but there's these other channels which just do really long analysis, and the long analysis just consists of stupid stuff. And, you know, he mentioned things like, you know, Nostalgia Critic and things like that. And one of the responses was like, I notice how the only examples of long analysis that you consider valuable are from people who agree with you politically. You know, it's supposed to be like an insult. And he was like saying, because obviously, you know, Lindsay has something like that. These are left-wing YouTubers who do their analysis. But it's kind of like, that sort of has to be the case, I think, because inherently being left of center, or I guess you maybe say a little bit left of center, is about trying to criticize the world we live in, think about the world we live in, and kind of dissect it and really deliberate on it. Whereas really being right wing is just not doing that. Like, being right wing is choosing to see, for example, that there's systemic poverty amongst black people in your country and being like, you know, I guess that's just a thing that is the case, and like actively going out of your way to not think about it or deliberate on why that might be the case. Or being like, you know, well, black people get shot because they commit more crimes. And again, not thinking about why. Like, that's literally what the right-wing position is on most issues, just to give the most surface level analysis of it. So it's not surprising that when they talk about films, the only thing they're going to talk about is, well, that's not how people would react if there was a space invasion. Or why did that woman not bother looking at where she was driving when she crashed her car because of the aliens? Like, literally, that's the only thing they're capable of doing.
If you do want to, I guess, get intellectual about things, including movies, then, you know, it's kind of hard to then turn around and like treat life in a different way. You know, like, like you mentioned, you know, poverty among black, say, Americans. Let's just use that as an example because it's been in the news. Like, if you're a white right winger, how do you look at that and say, oh yeah, that's natural? I mean, you have to be a racist then, wouldn't you? You'd have to be, oh, black people are just naturally, you know, poorer because they're stupider or whatever, instead of.
Yeah, which is why I think that their default action is to not think about it. Because like, that's the thing. I always found that funny about the whole like wage gap thing, where it's kind of, they would say, well, women just choose lower paying jobs, and it's like, well, the obvious next question is, why do women choose lower paying jobs? And the answer is either, you know, because naturally they're inclined to choose lower paying jobs, which would be kind of a sexist thing to say, or because there's systemic injustice. But the thing is, what they do is they just kind of avoid that question. Like, it doesn't matter why, it's just how it is. Like, so because they don't want to commit themselves to being like, that's kind of the, I guess, right of center liberal position of like, you know, so I guess what they'd call themselves classical liberals of like, I don't want to have to think about systems, so I'm just going to say, well, it's how it is. And, you know, because they don't want to be racist, they don't want to be reactionary or sexist or anything like that. So their immediate attitude is just, I'm not going to think about it.
Yeah, that's why you see so much right-wing comedy, so much right-wing commentary is just...
That was a Freudian slip.
Kind of, but right-wing commentary is just like, oh, shut up, stop going on about these problems, we're fine, and all of that stuff. Which...
Yeah, I do remember there's a really funny... So obviously you know Sargon of Akkad, right? Yeah. Of course, one time UKIP MEP candidate, he did I remember he did one video on this. There was a thing where essentially the question was, how do AI like Alexa and Siri respond to various kind of sexist comments? And the obvious question for why it was being asked was because, well, if these AI, for example, are treating sexist comments as a joke, like if someone says, you know, to Siri, make me a sandwich, bitch, you know, how's Siri going to respond? And literally, Sargon of Akkad did like a half-an-hour video where he was just reading this article on this topic. It was probably in The Guardian or whatever. He was reading an article, and literally after every single sentence, someone go, I just don't see why this is important. I just don't see why this matters. You know, it's just an AI refusing to think about how actually that could have implications beyond, you know, like the fact that obviously somebody has to program that AI. So why would they program that AI to respond to sexism in a jokey way and things like that? And what kind of messages? And they were just like, it's just an AI. You can't hurt Siri's feelings. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's literally what they do.
Yeah, I guess that is the message, I guess, because basically there's problems in the world and they have to acknowledge it, but they're just fine with how you know issues with the world are. And yeah, we've kind of strayed off talking about Goodfellas and the fact that they genuinely just don't want to dissect movies like this or any other movie in an intellectual way. The deepest it goes is, oh, isn't that a cool shot? Oh, when he kills him, doesn't the blood splatter in a great way? Which, you know, is just surface level stuff, and yeah, it's very frustrating to see that. But I guess, like we said, it's a kind of inevitable if you are of that political persuasion. That's how you got to think, because that's how you think about the rest of the world, as we've gone into. But anyway, Michael, we should conclude now. You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So basically, like I say, this film, I mean, it should be said, so we've kind of dunked a bit on the idea that anyone can just like this film while ignoring all of the interesting themes. I will say this, like, even without any of the interesting themes, I think this film's still like a 7 out of 10. Because, and I often say, I feel like something I've said before is that I feel like almost every single mob film, every single gangster film really is just like a 7 out of 10, because it's kind of just like, it's usually interesting, usually quite rewatchable, but not like great a lot of the time, is kind of my attitude to a lot of the gangster films I've seen. And certainly, before you get into the themes, this film is like that. You know, it's entertaining. It's definitely rewatchable, which, like I say, is for me the difference between a 6 and a 7. So the 7's like when you're talking about rewatchable films, and this film is rewatchable because it's exciting. It's got interesting editing. It's episodic, but not in like an annoying way. And there is kind of a connection with all the different characters and stuff. And there are things that happen quite early on in the film, and then come into play later on in the film. So I really enjoyed that. And yeah, I would say it's just a generally good film. But then, of course, if you do want to actually think about it, and I would say I don't really, for me, the masculinity stuff, as much as we've spoken about, it's not the main thing I take away from the film. The main thing I take away is more kind of the general idea of glorifying something and I guess romanticizing something in the way that this Henry Hill guy romanticizes being a gangster. And then the kind of taking away the veil, I guess, on that thing and showing it for what it really is, which is these people aren't, honorable people. These aren't like, I don't know, the Robin Hoods of their day who are doing something actually very good. They're just, scumbags, whatever else. They're not wise guys or anything like that. And obviously that's interesting. And I think the fact that the main character doesn't, because what you would usually do then is you would have the main character go through a lesson where he kind of learns it, and at the end it's like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. That was silly of me. Whereas instead in this film, he just doesn't learn his lesson. I think that's kind of an interesting thing you don't usually see in films. And I do think the funny thing about this film is certainly, I guess it's written in such a way which I can understand where somebody, especially somebody who's not really thinking about it, it doesn't spoon feed the audience into realizing the messaging. And I think that is something I really appreciate. Of course, it is something which inevitably leads to lots of people liking the film for the wrong reason. For me personally, so I am actually going to review it now, or say how I'd rank it. I really struggle between giving this film a high 8 or a low 9, because I do think it really is very good. I am a sucker for these cynical films where they take something where you might have certain preconceptions about it, and the characters have certain preconceptions about it, and the film kind of just shows how those preconceptions are complete bullshit. I really like that kind of style. And therefore, I guess I'm going to have to give it a low 9 because it appeals to me. And I'm going to put it, actually, curiously, above. We mentioned this director. I mentioned this director in a somewhat disparaging tone, so I guess it's appropriate I would put this film above it. Pulp Fiction, I'm putting above Pulp Fiction, which, like I say, is my favorite Quentin Tarantino film because I think it's Tarantino doing what he does best. But below, Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee. So that's in number 9, Goodfellas.
So yeah, Goodfellas, I am also going to give it a 9 out of 10. I'll just say right off the bat. Even though I don't really like the non-traditional structure, it's not really my thing. I still have to appreciate how great a movie this is. And if I did like the structure, it may be a 10 out of 10, which I'm sure it is for some people. But that's I just can't like it that much, unfortunately. But I do really like the themes and the messages, as we said before. Being in the mafia essentially means you are scum. You're not like the people from The Godfather who are all classy. And that is the correct way to portray the mafia. It's not glamorous. The romantic version of the mafia happens at the beginning, and then by the end you realise, it's all bullshit. Going for the American dream is inevitably toxic as well, because you have to fuck people over, which is something, I do agree with. Trying to, be as masculine as possible is also toxic. And, I think that is very, very much the case with Joe Pesci's character, because his fragile masculinity, or he wants to be as masculine as possible. That leads him to shoot this guy, obviously, who's a made man, and that eventually gets him killed. So yeah, his demand to be seen as really tough fucks him over in the end, and he dies. And doesn't even get an open casket funeral, does he? So overall, you said, Michael, you like it that it doesn't spoon feed the message, but I do think it's a problem if people don't get the message, as we've seen. Like that,
but it means you get to feel better than everyone else.
I feel smarter, but then I just feel depressed as well. There's another comment that I saw here on The Guardian. I have to read it out. And so somebody put, "Sometimes masculinity is just masculinity. Please don't make me self-examine." And someone replied to another comment in the thread saying, and then we could rewatch every classic movie through the lenses of heteronormativity, race, gender, ageism, body positivity, blah, blah, blah. Or we could just watch a film and then recommend it to friends and family, thereby cutting the agenda-driven critics out of the loop entirely. And somebody replied, or we could just get used to thinking critically about films. And I am with that second guy. Like, if you just... Okay... If you just want, again, it's just anti-intellectual. Let's just not think about it. Let's just think about how, if you see this movie through the lens of race, say, no, I don't want to hear that. I just want to get on with, watching this movie. And he's called Jake. So I'd say he specifically says cutting the agenda-driven critics out of the loop entirely. So apparently these people watching this Martin Scorsese movie on Goodfellas have an agenda rather than just, seeing what the message is in the movie and then discussing it. Just incredibly anti-intellectual, and I think that is definitely the case, and it is frustrating, even though it makes you feel smart, doesn't it, Michael? But at the end of the day, what's the point in being smart if everybody else is stupid? What is the point at the end of the day?
Oh, yeah, that is true. Yeah, that's a good point. Imagine that. That's a Twilight Zone episode right there.
Yeah,
smartest. I guess it's a bit like Idiocracy.
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, it was kind of a different thing there. But yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't even think we're that smart, but we're like looking at the movie and what messages it presents. What is the subtext of what's going on in this movie? Some people just...
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, just so keen to just dismiss that out of hand. And it's just don't watch movies then. Don't comment on a fucking article about a movie then. Again, we have to pretend there are no problems in the world. And nothing is ever complex. We have to just, dismiss everything to make us feel better. Anyway, so Michael, what are we doing next? I gave it a 9 out of 10, by the way, Goodfellas. What are we doing next week?
Well, Luke, we are doing Psycho. So that's going to be good.
Yeah, we are doing Psycho. The start of Spooktober.
Yes, Spooktober.
A great time of the year. So I
actually do really enjoy Spooktober.
All right, good stuff. Well, thanks for listening. We've been selecting and reflecting on Goodfellas. Probably in the Hall of Fame of movies which are tragically misunderstood by both its supporters and its critics, as we have detailed. Join us next week for Psycho. Who have you been, Michael?
I've been Michael.
I've been Luke. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.